Okay, today we're going to talk about two-step equations and variables on both sides. Um, Both of these are things about solving. So the word you're going to see in the directions is solve, and that means to figure out what your missing variable is. In this case, we're going to be solving for x because that's the variable that we're missing. So remember, a variable is an unknown, and we want to figure out what that unknown is. So we have some special rules. Firstly, what you need to make sure you remember is that whatever you do on one side, you have to do the other. The reason we do this is we need to keep the equation balanced. And when we talk about sides, we're always talking about this equal sign. Okay? So when we say sides, we're not doing here and here. We're doing one on the left, one on the right of the equal sign. It's always the equal sign. Okay? So with the two-step equation, our goal is to get the variable by itself. In this case, our variable is right here. It's the letter x. Okay? And there are two things that need to move to get x by itself. One is the 3, and the other one is the plus 5. So we're going to have to move both the 3 and the plus 5. There we go. Okay, so we got to move the 3, we got to move the plus 5, and when we're done with that, x will be by itself. Now, you can do either the 3 or the 5, but if you want to make your life easier and avoid fractions as long as possible, you should always deal with this plus or minus first. And we're going to do the opposite of whatever you see here. So if I see a plus 5, we're going to do the opposite of plus 5, which of course is minus 5. And the reason we do that is because we really want a 0 here. And if you do 5 minus 5, you get 0. And 3x plus 0 is simply 3x. So it's really important that this equals 0. Okay? Equal sign stays where it is, and whatever you do on one side, we got to keep the equation balanced, so we're going to do it on the other side too. And we got on the right side 11 take away 5, which of course is the number 6. So I now have 3x is equal to 6. So the next step is we want to get this 3 by itself, and sometimes it's written as 3x. There's a hidden symbol right here between the 3 and the x, and it's the time symbol. And we never write it, but anytime you see a number next to a letter or two letters next to each other, there is a hidden symbol, and it's always the time symbol. So it's not add, it's not subtract, it's not divide, it will always be multiply. Okay, so this means 3 times x, and we're going to undo 3 times x. The way you undo a time symbol is divide. So we're going to divide by 3. So we got times 3 and divided by 3, and those things cancel out. And if you do it on one side, we'll do it on the other side. Okay, so on the left side, we do 3 divided by 3, which is, of course, 1. So we're left with 1x. And on the right side, we have 6 divided by 3, which is, of course, the number 2. And then lastly, on the left side, we're doing 1 times x. Well, 1 times anything is that thing. So that's simply x. And now we have our answer, which is x equals 2. And this line I generally don't write because I always know that it's going to be 1x is the same as x. But I wanted to show it to you just to make sure that you remember that 3 divided by 3 is not 0, it's 1. But if you want to skip straight from divide by 3 to the bottom line here in the answer, I am perfectly fine with that. So this is an example of two-step equations. Now let's look at variables on both sides. For variables on both sides, it's called that because we obviously have variables. There's more than one of them. And there's the equal sign, and it's on both sides of the equal sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to first get our variables together. So I got 2 that I have to deal with. I have the 2x right here, and we also have the 4x on the right side. And we get to choose. We can move either one. I would highly recommend you take care of the x's first. Otherwise, you can get yourself in some trouble later, or even you might end up with extra steps. So if you want to have as few steps and the least likelihood of making mistakes, get your x's together first. So our choice is either we're going to move the 2x or we're going to move the 4x. If we move the 4x, we're going to subtract 4x from both sides, and you end up with 2 minus 4, which is, of course, a negative. So if you'd like to avoid the negatives, and most of us do, we're going to move the smaller number first. In that case, it's the 2x. So we're going to move the 2x. It's positive. I want it to go away, so we are going to subtract 2x from both sides. Okay, let's check the left side. If I take 2x, I subtract 2x, I get 0x, and 0x is the same as 0. So left side works. We got to do it to the right side. We can only combine like terms. So the x's combine with the x's. You can never do numbers with the x's. Okay, so x's and x's combine. We're going to do 4x take away 2x. On the left side, 2x take away 2x is 0. I'm left with the number 3. And on the right-hand side, 4x take away 2x is 2x. And I still have this minus 5. Now, look what happened here. This is another two-step equation. So we should be able to solve it the same way we solved this two-step equation. The only difference is the variables on the right. That doesn't change our approach. So here's our variable. There are 2 things that we have to move. One is the number 2, And of course 1 is the negative 5. And we're going to choose to move the plus or minus first because we want to make our life as easy as possible and not deal with fractions. So we're going to take care of this minus 5. The opposite of minus 5 is plus 5. So if I take 5 away and then I add 5, I get back to 0. I do it on one side, I got to do it to the other side of the equation. And we're going to cross that out because that equals 0. On the right-hand side, we're left with the 2x because that went away. On the left-hand side, we get 5 plus 3, which of course is the number 8. And our last step is we want to get x by itself. This is, of course, another multiplication problem, so we're going to divide to undo that. And whatever you do to one side, we do to the other side. On the right, we have 1x, which, of course, is simply x. On the left side, we have 8 divided by 2, which is the number 4. So in this case, x equals 4, and it's written backwards, and that's perfectly okay. It means the same thing as x equals 4. So 4 equals x, x equals 4. These are interchangeable. They mean exactly the same thing. So this is an example of variables on both sides. However, I want to show you a couple interesting things that might end up happening. So let's go take a look at this problem again. And instead of having a 2x here, we're going to change it and we're going to make it a 4x. Okay? And I probably should erase the rest of this because it's all going to change. Okay, so let's do the problem again. This time it's going to be a 4x. So the first step would be to subtract 4x from both sides. And what happens here is when we take 4x away 4x, take away 4x, we get 0. So on the left side, I'm left with 3. On the right-hand side, that goes away, and I'm left with a negative 5. And now I got an interesting problem. First off, there are no more x's at all, which means I am going to have one of two possibilities, and this is one possibility. Now I look at this problem, and it says 3 equals to negative 5. You should know by now that 3, of course, does not equal negative 5, and there's no way it can equal negative 5. So what's happening here is no matter what x we pick, this is always going to be a false statement. 3 will never equal negative 5. So the solution here is going to be the words, no solution. There is no possible solution that I can come up with for x where 3 is going to be negative 5. So the answer then, of course, is no solution. Some people think that x equals 0 is the same as no solution. That does not mean the same thing. X equals 0 is a solution. It's a very specific solution, and of course that means the x is 0. So don't confuse no solution with x equals 0. When the numbers do not equal and there are no x's left, the answer is no solution. Now the other thing that could end up happening is you go through all of your process and you get something like 3 is equal to 3. In this case, this is a true statement. So this was a false statement over here. We had no solution. Here we end up with a true statement. If you have a true statement, again, it doesn't matter what x is. This is always true. So x can be 10, x can be 100, x can be a million, it can be negative 5, it could be pi. It doesn't matter. This is always true. So your solution is going to be all real numbers. So every single number that you currently know, it will work. It works for all real numbers. Okay, so if you see your variables vanish and you end up with a true statement, you're going to write all real numbers. And if you see your variables vanish and you end up with a false statement, you write no solution. In all other cases, the variable won't vanish and you'll have x equal and then there'll be some number here. This is what happens most of the time, but these other two can happen, so it's important that you don't get scared when you see something weird happening when your variables vanish. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. But your level 1 is going to be variables on both sides and two-step equations, so make sure that you can solve both of those.